Stanza 31. Up from earth's center through the seventh gate I rose, and on the throne of Saturn sate, and many knots unraveled by the road, but not the knot of human death and fate. Paraphrase. Through 7 gates I passed on my long journey toward omnipresence. At the last of them, the mighty cranial light, I paused a while to view the road behind me and before. Many victories I had won along the way. Many profound insights had I gained. I had banished satanic ignorance from the kingdom of my consciousness. I no longer lived under the sway of physical desire. I found myself even now, however, not completely free from the influence of karmic law. Expanded meaning. The consciousness of man during his wakeful state is normally centered in his 5 senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, hence his complete body identification. In the subconscious sleep state, his attention is partly withdrawn from these sense centers and brought closer to the invisible realm of the blissful soul. He finds greater peace in sleep than in wakefulness, for his mind and life force are centered more inwardly in the heart and in the lower spine. During deep meditation, the mind and life force are withdrawn further still from the senses, and also from the internal organs. They are centered consciously in the spine. There are 7 nerve centers, or gates, through which the soul must pass on its journey toward self-realization. The lowest of these centers, chakras they are called in the yoga tradition, is located in the coccyx plexus at the base of the spine. It has been known from ancient times as the earth center. Above that center there are 5 more chakras in the spine. The 7th and highest of them is located in the cranium at the top of the head. This center is traditionally known as the 1,000-petaled lotus or crown chakra. OMAR KHAYYAM refers to it as the throne of Saturn. Saturn represents satanic ignorance, the dark side of human nature. Ignorance rules the kingdom of human consciousness as long as the spinal centers, or gates, remain closed, their spiritual potential unrealized, owing to the downward direction of their energy. The gates are open when their energy is directed upward to the brain, thereby awakening their latent spiritual consciousness. The awakening of the chakras comes only after long, careful discipline. Great joy, as well as great mental and spiritual power, come when the 7 gates are open. As long as the 7 centers remain closed, man's high spiritual potential is obscured by satanic ignorance. Thus, to the worldly man, the inner kingdom is an impenetrable mystery, and seems to many an outright fiction. The fiction, of course, lies in their view of reality. Spiritually asleep, they have little more control over their destinies than a dreamer in his subconscious world. The nerves are channels through which the life force enables the mind and body to interact. As the life force moves down the spine and out to the body and its senses, the mind is drawn outward also. Sense stimulation from within impels one to seek fulfillment in sense pleasures. This same nervous system, however, constitutes the one and only path to spiritual enlightenment, regardless of formal religious affiliation. When the energy can be coaxed to reverse its flow from the senses to the brain, It reveals to our consciousness another world. This stimulation of the nerves at their inner source awakens the desire for self-fulfillment and for self-realization. With progressive interiorization through daily meditation, one develops subtle inner perceptions vastly more satisfying than their muted echoes from the senses. The knotty problems of life and death are resolved, and the heart's feelings are extricated at last from the need for further incarnations of material involvement. The 7 gates of escape. 6 of the 7 gates through which the soul passes, ere it can enter the realm of omnipresence, are located in the spinal plexuses, the coccyx at the base of the spine, the sacral, 1.5 inches higher, the lumbar, opposite the navel, the dorsal, opposite the heart, the cervical, opposite the throat, and the medulla oblongata at the base of the brain. In the forehead, during deep meditation, is beheld a subtle astral light. This Christ center, so-called, is not the 7th gate, but a reflection of the vortex of energy in the medulla oblongata. The point between the eyebrows is the positive pole of the 6th center, of which the medulla is the negative. The true 7th gate is reached through the light in the Christ center. When this 7th gate, the 1,000-rayed throne of light in the cranium, is awakened, one attains the power and the wisdom to banish ignorance from the body. The deep meditator, even after raising his consciousness to this point, is not yet able to solve the final mystery of life and death, nor has he escaped the influence of karma. To achieve perfect soul emancipation, he must leave the body altogether and merge into the infinite spirit. He must be able to leave his body consciously and return to it at will. Physical death doesn't bring soul release. The soul casing includes not only the physical body, but 2 subtler bodies as well, the astral and the causal or ideational. At death, the soul, though shedding the outermost of its casings, remains enclosed in its astral and ideational bodies. Nor is it truly free from its physical casing. The astral body contains the energy, latent in the form of material desires, to form another physical body. Suppose a little salt water were sealed in a jar, that jar enclosed in another, and the second jar again enclosed in a third. Now imagine these 3 jars floating on the ocean. What if the outermost jar were broken? The water would still be enclosed in the other 2 jars, and therefore would not mingle with the ocean. The physical body is the outermost jar. The soul is the salt water in the innermost. The process of divine creation may be compared to the construction of a building. First, in the order of creation, comes the builder's will to create. He clarifies the purpose he intends the building to serve. Next, he describes what he wants it to look like. Finally, he projects his concept in the form of a blueprint. Using the blueprint, the carpenters put their skill and energy into constructing the building. They also put into it their vibrations, for example, their enthusiasm for the project. What our eyes behold in the end product is the building itself, not the energy and vibrations that went into its construction, and still less the underlying thought forms of which the building is the material manifestation. Behind this material universe, similarly, creating and defining it, lies a subtle realm of energy, sometimes described as the astral world. Matter, though solid in appearance, is in fact only an electromagnetic wave, a vibration of energy. Behind the universe of energy lies an even subtler, but nevertheless perfectly distinct realm of ideation or causation. As matter is a manifestation of energy, So energy is, in its turn, a manifestation of vibrations of thought. At physical death, this body, the soul's outermost casing, dies. But the soul is still isolated from the infinite by its other casings, the subtler astral and the much subtler ideational bodies. Only when all three casings have become broken, transcended in perfect self-realization, is the soul reunited at last with the infinite spirit. The salt water in the innermost jar can then mingle freely with the surrounding ocean. In the Bible, it is written that Jesus was resurrected after 3 days. Those days symbolized the 3 stages of liberation from his physical, astral, and ideational bodies with their attached karmas. Thus, those who, quote, have ears to hear, are given to understand that Jesus was a fully liberated master. Prayer is not enough. Many people imagine that the only way to contact God is by prayer, which they offer not lovingly, but in a spirit of blind supplication. Unless impelled to urgency by some crisis in their lives, they pray vaguely and absent-mindedly, then turn away and hope for the best. Years of such beggarly offerings may go unanswered. The spiritual benefits for the persons praying will be haphazard. There is nothing vague or haphazard, on the other hand, in the attainments of God-saturated sages, whose bliss state is the result not of blind prayer, but of direct, determined, loving inner communion with God. Their prayers are instantly answered, and their very lives are beacons that guide and encourage souls still wandering in the darkness of delusion. The expression down to earth commonly refers to an attitude that is realistic, practical. For the spiritual aspirant, it is as necessary to be down to earth in this sense as for anyone who has dealings with the world. The divine kingdom, though physically immaterial, is nonetheless very real. Indeed, because matter is only a manifestation of divine realities, the spiritual kingdom must be considered more real than its material counterpart. Only divinely realistic, practical aspirants can discover its hidden ways and byways. The most notable differences between being down to earth spiritually and being down to earth in a worldly sense is that spiritual realism is expansive, where worldly realism tends to be contractive. Spiritual realism, the willingness, for example, to face uncompromisingly the full truth about oneself, softens the heart and fills it eventually with kindness toward all. Worldly realism, on the other hand, tends to harden the heart and to fill it with pride and selfishness. One cannot find God, the supreme reality, by roaming about vaguely like a knight-errant in search of the Holy Grail. Blind prayer directed with vague expectations toward someone up there, without a thought for achieving conscious communion with Him, is like shooting an arrow in the dark, with no clear notion what the target is or where. Vague prayer may result in vaguely good karma, but it will not lift the soul out of karmic confinement. Spiritual discoveries must be approached with the objective realism of the physical scientist. Great physicists have made their discoveries by applying known principles, and not by offering hopeful but imprecise petitions to the great void. Divine discoveries, too, come through the application of known laws. These laws must be tested and proved again and again by every individual. Spiritual discoveries result not from prayers offered in the obscure hope of pleasing God. To raise the treasures embedded in the ocean floor of consciousness, the mind must be withdrawn from the senses and its restlessness stilled. Energy and consciousness must then be directed with great determination up the spine to the inner source of one's being. Only by reversing the flow of energy from the senses to the spine and brain can life's truths be discovered and conscious union with the infinite attained. Yoga, a science and an art. The process of inner awakening is known as yoga. Yoga was discovered countless centuries ago in India by men who, in their own right, were great scientists. The knowledge of this science of yoga spread among spiritual aspirants throughout the East. From this 31st stanza of the RUBAIYAT, and from other stanzas of the poem, it is clear that Omar Khayyam knew and practiced yoga. Yoga has been identified in modern times with a system of physical postures or asanas. The benefits of this system, known as Hatha Yoga, while remarkable physically and mentally, are indirect spiritually. The true purpose of yoga practice, on the other hand, is primarily spiritual. Yoga means union. The union implied is the soul's expansion into infinite spirit by the practice of scientific techniques of concentration and meditation. The yogi learns by controlling certain psychophysiological functions of his body to enter progressively deep states of meditation. He withdraws his mind from its familiar levels of awareness, conscious, in other words, outwardly focused, and subconscious, into the ineffably blissful superconscious. Important to this process of interiorization is control of the life force. Withdrawing the life force from the senses to the heart and the spine assists the consciousness to withdraw its attention from the outer world. In the conscious state, the mind is made aware of the world through the senses. In the subconscious state, the mind withdraws from sensory awareness as the life force retires to partial rest in the hidden grottos or chakras of the spine. In the superconscious state, the consciousness and life force together pass upward through the spinal gates to the brain, and thence outward into the omnipresence of spirit. Omar Khayyam makes it clear that the spiritual states he experienced were not unique, that they are available to all who will endeavor scientifically and with deep sincerity to pass through the 7 gates of inner awakening until they succeed at last in uniting their souls with God. Everyone ultimately must unearth the mystery of life and death, for only within lies our abiding reality. Other spiritual traditions also describe the 7 centers. The first chapter, for example, of the book of Revelation refers to them as the mystery of the 7 stars. In Proverbs 8:34, we read, quote, "Blessed is the man that heareth me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the posts of my doors." And in Ezekiel 28:14, we read, quote, "Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire." This is a reference to the energy in the spine moving up and down through the chakras, which, once awakened, reveal themselves to the inner eye ablaze with the astral light. Zechariah 4:2 states, quote, "And the angel said unto me, What seest thou? And I said, I have looked, and behold a candlestick all of gold, with a bowl upon the top of it, and his 7 lamps thereon." The candlestick is the spine, described as gold because shining with astral light. The bowl at the top is the cranium, and the 7 lamps are the chakras. 7 has always been considered a sacred number for its association with the 7 chakras. Needless to add, the chakras have long been known in the East. Worldly people there, however, are no more enlightened than worldly people in the West, and know of the chakras only by hearsay. This 31st stanza of the RUBAIYAT shows clearly Omar's advancement on the path of yoga, not a primrose path of wine and drunkenness, but the secret, arduous, yet infinitely rewarding path of divine intoxication. Editorial comment. Christian writers since Brother Lawrence, and probably long before him, have urged people to, quote, practice the presence of God. Many have sought methods that would help people in this practice. One especially inspiring book, Letters by a Modern Mystic, by the missionary Frank Laubach, recommends mentally talking to God rather than thinking about Him. For the mind that is habituated to thinking outwardly, it is difficult to interiorize one's thoughts even of God. Frank Laubach, for example, describes his perception of God's presence thus, quote, "Today God seems to me to be just behind everything. I feel Him there. He is just under my hand, just under the typewriter, just behind this desk, just inside the file, just inside the camera," end quote. Frank Laubach, a truly saintly man, was aware of God's presence inwardly as well as outwardly. There was nothing, however, in his religious training to suggest that there exists an inner world of divine realization. It was divinely natural and right for him, in the context of his own spiritual development, to turn his perceptions outward. The richer a person's inner life, moreover, the more exalted will be his outer experiences also. And yet, the direction emphasized in Scripture is different. Jesus, for example, stated, "The kingdom of God is within." Paramhansa Yogananda's explanation above makes it easier to internalize this practice of the divine presence. Stimulation of the senses from within, he says, draws the mind toward the outer limits of the body and toward sensory enjoyments. But stimulation at the inner limits of the nervous system, by reversing the flow of energy from the senses to the spine and brain, inspires the mind to develop a consciousness of God's indwelling presence. Thus, the seeker should concentrate on developing his inner senses, the power of hearing behind the physical sense of hearing, the power of vision behind physical vision. Normally, a person's consciousness and energy flow outward from sheer force of habit and from the conditioning one receives in the normal process of upbringing and education. Frank Laubach's book describes his struggle to overcome that conditioning. For most people, if the mind is not actively engaged in the pursuit of outer fulfillments, it chugs on quietly like an idling motor. People think absent-mindedly of events, people, and situations in their lives. Or their minds are occupied with fillers, with leafing through magazines, turning on the radio, or gazing out the window at whatever is happening outside. Absent-mindedness and fillers. Paramhansa Yogananda rated these two as among the most insidious influences in the aspirant's life. Taken one instance at a time, they may seem inconsequential. Taken all together, however, they are formidable. A slowly dripping faucet may, during the course of a day, waste many gallons of water. Yogananda's explanation above suggests ways by which these slight but constant seepages of energy can be prevented. Stimulation of the nerves at their inner source promotes divine consciousness. It helps also to think of God, certainly, but it is not strictly necessary. If atheists experiment with this teaching, they too will get results. Indeed, to think of God is to define Him, and to define Him is, in a sense, to limit Him. The steady expansion of consciousness surpasses all definitions of Him, who is indefinable. Let your devotion to God and your thoughts of Him proceed as much as possible from your experience of the divine in the silence. Meditation is the supreme way to internalize the flow of energy and consciousness. In daily life, too, one can transform absent-mindedness and the fancied need for fillers by concentrating on the life source within. Chant Om mentally at each chakra, in upward sequence from the base of the spine. Direct the energy in those chakras up the spine by mentally gazing, as it were, at the point between the eyebrows. Concentrate especially in the medulla oblongata. This point, Paramhansa Yogananda explained, is the seat of ego in the body. That is why proud people hold their heads high. In English, we describe them as looking down their noses. Italians describe them as viewing the world sotto il naso, beneath the nose. Actually, the reason the head is drawn backward is that ego tension at the base of the skull, the region of the medulla oblongata, pulls the head back. Spiritually unawakened human beings, Yogananda explained, act from that center, whereas enlightened masters act from the positive pole of that center, the Christ center between the eyebrows, the seat also of spiritual vision. The fact of the ego's centeredness in the medulla oblongata is not dynamic to most people's awareness. They objectify their energy and are therefore more conscious of its outer effects than of its source within. Beginning meditators, consequently, when they try to concentrate at the Christ center, come at it from outer awareness and often create in themselves a vague feeling of tension, even of confusion. Concentration on the medulla oblongata is not recommended, obviously, as a means of strengthening ego consciousness. The important thing is to direct the energy from its natural source to the Christ center between the eyebrows. The energy must be released from ego consciousness to attain a more universal awareness. That is why, in all cultures, the recognized gesture of humility is a bowed head. To reach the Christ center, one must first be aware of one's present focus in the medulla. Don't hold the thought of ego at the medulla, but gather your self-awareness simply to pass it onward in a spirit of self-offering and freedom. From the medulla, gaze mentally at the Christ center between the eyebrows. Think of the Christ center as a subtle, not a physical reality. I have seen people during meditation frown or contort their eyebrows or give other indications of the physical effort they were making. Be mentally relaxed. See the Christ center or the spiritual eye not as a physical part of your brain. It is not a muscle to be employed somehow in an effort to hold energy there. View it, absorbed all the while in the awareness of inner peace, as the doorway to freedom in infinity. The more you concentrate at the Christ center, the more rapid will be your spiritual progress. As your concentration deepens in this practice, you will become aware also of the upper chakras, the heart or dorsal, and the cervical opposite the throat. Include them, devotion in the heart, calm expansion in the cervical, in your sense of upward flow towards the Christ center. Because the mind often thinks verbally, it will also help you, when not using words, mentally to repeat a simple word formula. Two of these that Paramhansa Yogananda recommended were, reveal thyself, and I am thine, be thou mine. Throughout the Orient, wherever this great work by Omar Khayyam is known and loved, it is understood that Omar was a mystic, that his beautiful quatrains were hymns in praise of mystical love, not of temporal pleasures, that his, quote, wine was the nectar of divine ecstasy, and his tavern the inner room of meditative peace. No hedonist would dwell so long or so earnestly on the fleeting nature of his earthly pleasures, nor on the mysterious certainty of death, as Omar did in his RUBAIYAT. He was a sage poet. Like all truly wise men, his mind was not shackled by conventions. The orthodox of his day considered him a heretic. It was partly to conceal his broad thoughts from narrow minds that he expressed himself, even as Jesus did, in parables. His use of sensual imagery served also to suggest to sincere aspirants that divine joy is a true and lasting fulfillment, not a frustration of earthly desires. As Jesus said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." This free verse commentary is based on the interpretations of Paramhansa Yogananda. Awake for morning in the bowl of night, has flung the stone that puts the stars to flight. And lo, the hunter of the east has caught the Sultan's turret in a noose of light. Awake, awake, my soul, lo, the long night of ignorance has fled. Pale stars of earthly longings disappear. Ancient wisdom from the east, eternal light, encircles now the tall turret of my worldly pride. Dreaming when dawn's left hand was in the sky, I heard a voice within the tavern cry, "Awake, my little ones, and fill the cup, before life's liquor in its cup be dry." The first glimpse of his light, pale, but promising, set all my hopes ablaze. Would he come soon? In answer, from forgotten corners of my inner peace, love whispered, "Child, if your cup grows dry, is it by my neglect? Lo, the bottle sits there on the table, cool, inviting. Who placed it there but me? If you thirst for love, yours now is the task. Come, fill the cup. Think not my dreams to quench your ancient thirst. Come, fill the cup, and in the fire of spring, the winter garment of repentance fling. The bird of time has but a little way to fly, and lo, the bird is on the wing. Why mourn the past? What's done is done. Come, in a springtime mood of warmth and eagerness, let us fill to the brim our cup of inner peace. Drink deeply, O my soul, savor that richest wine, the wine of spirit, ere life, like an aging bird, tiring of its restless flight, curves slowly to its nest, and, folding its wings, sinks back to sleep again. And look, 1,000 blossoms with the day woke, and 1,000 scattered into clay. And this first summer month that brings a rose shall take Jamshid and Kaikobad away. But come with old Khayyam and leave the lot of Kaikobad and Kaikosru forgot. Let Rustum lay about him as he will, or Hatim Tai cry supper, heed them not. The things of earth, the qualities of men, these ever rise and fall, wax beautiful, then fade. But there where wild fruits hang, clustered on wisdom's tree, there lies release, an end to birth and death, eternal flight from the dull round of matter's unchanging change. With me along some strip of herbage strown that just divides the desert from the sown, where name of slave and sultan scarce is known, and pity Sultan Mahmud on his throne. Here with a loaf of bread beneath the bough, a flask of wine, a book of verse, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness, and wilderness is paradise now. Come, sit in silence, O my soul, wrapped in the wilderness of inner peace, away from madness, human wants, the brittle cry of laughter, how quickly stilled, hammered and broken into bitter tears. Drink deep, commune with our beloved, singing beside, inside us every hour, calling us to eternity. How sweet is mortal sovereignty, think some. Others, how blessed the paradise to come. Ah, take the cash in hand and wave the rest. Oh, the brave music of a distant drum. Dream not of pomp, the burdened power of kings, nor any future heaven high and far. Here and hereafter, both must change. Seize the eternal now, that steady, distant seeming beat that pounds forever quietly beneath the restless pace of countless feet. Alike for those who for today prepare, and those that after a tomorrow stare, a muezzin from the tower of darkness cries, fools, your reward is neither here nor there. Daily preoccupations, scattered and shallow, bricks set with patience by a shriveled heart, the self-enclosure of a small success. Can worthless activities bring worthwhile results? Sand castles on a beach. Not now, nor ever in futurity is happiness for him who seeks it on the shifting sands and roams endlessly the windy dunes of slow passing time. The worldly hope men set their hearts upon turns ashes or it prospers and anon. Like snow upon the desert's dusty face, lighting a little hour or two, is gone. Think in this battered caravanserai, whose doorways are alternate night and day, how Sultan after Sultan with his pomp abode his hour or two and went his way. What cup but one with nectar sweet enough to free us from this wheel, to free us from past errors and the fate that lurks around each bend in punishment? What cup but ecstasy? Beloved, drown my griefs not in dim forgetfulness. Cleanse them instead in rainbow rivers of pure vision. Ah, give me that cup, for even tomorrow, dawn riding on a helpless sky, yes, even tomorrow may already be too late. One moment in annihilation's waste, one moment of the well of life to taste. The stars are setting and the caravan starts for the dawn of nothing. Oh, make haste. The annihilation of all dreams, fair summer turned winter, what can this seem but a waste? But winter soon passes in love's wilderness. Dead leaves blow away, nursed by springs of inner life. Flowers of soul joy spring into laughing colors, crowding the land with springtime and renewal. Blessed, oh blessed that seeming nothingness. Set out for that dawn, my caravan of silence. Oh, make haste. Myself when young did eagerly frequent doctor and saint, and heard great argument about it and about, but evermore came out by the same door as in I went. To teachers went old Omar as a boy. Deeply from them he learned. Stilly he entered through the mystic door, drank at the eternal fountainhead, to return flushed with eagerness, daily richer from the treasury of truth. With them the seed of wisdom did I sow, and with my own hand labored it to grow. And this was all the harvest that I reaped. I came like water, and like wind I go, sowing the seeds of wisdom deep within. This was the blissful harvest Omar reaped. His mind, once a thin brown river of desire, narrowed by banks of matter consciousness, twisted its lonely way across a desert. But then the blazing fire of true vision dried up and banished ages of human want. Free as the wind now, Omar comes and goes, spreads wings of consciousness over space, and claims the very universe his home. Ah, fill the cup, what boots it to repeat how time is slipping underneath our feet. Unborn tomorrow and dead yesterday, why fret about them if today be sweet? Yes, fill the cup, drunk with that perfect bliss. Let me live in eternity, forgetting time, the ups and downs of human destiny. Why dance to that dull jig? Let us live in, but not for the moment. Ah, the unfading sweetness of that timeless now. And lately by the tavern door agape came stealing through the dusk an angel shape, bearing a vessel on his shoulder, and he bid me taste of it, and 'twas the grape. Quite lately, brothers, from the inner room where joy awaits us, laughter pure and sweet, into the darkness of my quiet mind an angel came, a ray of the purest light, bidding me taste his nectar. Ah, friends, rejoice with me. The drink he gave me was the mystic grape. The grape that can with logic absolute the 72 jarring sects confute. The subtle alchemist that in a trice life's leaden metal into gold transmute. But leave the wise to wrangle, and with me the quarrel of the universe let be. And in some corner of the hubbub couched, make game of that which makes as much of thee. Why seek our conquests in the dull war of words? Dry pulp, the fruit that grows on learning's tree. Sour dogmas, theologians' husks, leave these to starving minds. Go deep within, far from complexity, hidden in inner peace. There all our answers lie. Find truth in noise, so confusion mocks us in earthly counterpoint. Turn back that empty jest. Gaze, and in silence smile. For in and out, above, about, below, 'tis nothing but a magic shadow show, played in a box whose candle is the sun, round which we phantom figures come and go. The ball no question makes of A's and no's, but right or left as strikes the player goes. And he that tossed thee down into the field, he knows about it all, he knows, he knows. Only one, deathless, unbounded, who tossed us out into the field of active life, only God can solve this mortal paradox, the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the whys, why-nots of life. Come, seek him out. The answers await us in his outstretched hand. And this I know, whether the one true light kindle to love, or wrath consume me quite, one glimpse of it within the tavern caught, better than in the temple lost outright. This much I know, whether the one true light awake me to love and serve my fellow man, or turn me in wrath against my petty self, incite me to burn forever my dark ignorance, the different paths in short of human creed, what matter? One glimpse of truth within the cave of peace, better 1,000,000 times than all the 1,000 creeds. The talk of this path, of that, of high and lower ways of right religion, of fair and pious maxims, but ever the truth unknown. Up from earth's center through the 7th gate I rose, and on the throne of Saturn sate, and many knots unraveled by the road, but not the knot of human death and fate. There was a door to which I found no key, there was a veil past which I could not see. Some little talk a while of me and thee there seemed, and then no more of thee and me. Deep is this teaching, rare to be understood. Up from earth's center in the human spine, man's consciousness shall pass through 7 doors. Thus only can one grow from ignorance to final certitude. Yet even human wisdom at its height can never loose the subtlest final knot. So long as consciousness remains of I and thou, the chasm that divides us from our love, making us separate, the Lord and we, that last fine knot will never be untied. Lo, the broad infinite and little petty man, even these are but one, decked out in different robes. Then to the rolling heaven itself I cried, asking what lamp had destiny to guide her little children stumbling in the dark, and a blind understanding heaven replied. The vine had struck a fiber which about it clings my being. Let the Sufi flout of my base metal may be filed a key that shall unlock the door he howls without. And even the wisest of all worldly men is blind and ignorant beside that blissful one who, freed from all bondage, dances in cosmic light, drawing his wisdom from truth's fountainhead. No roaming for him now on the dark plains of night. Joyous, serene, his soul having slipped the noose, now soars evermore bliss-drunk, lightly singing on cloud skyways to infinity. Ah, moon of my delight, who knowest no wane, the moon of heaven is rising once again. How oft hereafter rising shall she look through this same garden after me in vain.